So we're going to start off by looking at variables in JavaScript that are declared with the var keyword. So I'm just going to actually set a comment here. Variables declared with var. And the differences between variables that are declared with var, let, and const have to do with how they're scoped and just how they're treated by the JavaScript engine. So we're going to start by just declaring a very simple variable called name, and I'm going to set that to my name. And with that variable, we can log that to the console just to make sure that we declared it properly, that everything's working correctly. So if we do that, we can just start by typing a very basic console log statement, and inside of that, we're going to place our name variable. When we refresh our browser, looky, we get to see my name printed out to the console. And we can do a lot with this alone. If we wanted to declare some more variables, let's see, we can declare a variable called total and set that equal to 1 plus 2. And if we console log out another value, we can console log our total. And when we refresh our browser, we get a number of 3. So we can see that our var variables, the very basic variables we've declared, have been printed to the console as expected. Now, the thing with var variables is that they are scoped based on where they're declared. So for example, if I declare these two variables that I've declared with var have been scoped globally because they've been declared in the global scope. And basically the global scope means that they are outside of any function block. If I declare a var variable within a function, then I have scoped that var variable within that function. So for example, if I create a function called my function, and let's say I declare a variable called last name. My last name, is Ose. I have now scoped this var variable locally. If I try to access this from outside this function, we'll see what happens. So let me log something to the console. We'll log my last name and we'll refresh. And we get an error here telling us uncaught reference error, last name is not defined. And the reason why is because there is no globally scoped last name variable, which means that outside of this function block, there isn't another last name variable that we can access. We don't know what last name is as far as the global scope is concerned. However, if I wanted to go inside of this function block, let me just take this console log statement and move it inside of the function block. If I made a call to this function, then we'll see what happens. And then we see that my last name is printed to the console like normal. So basically with var variables, we can declare them both globally and within a function, and they are scoped accordingly. So if I declare them outside of a function, that means that they have been scoped globally. If I declare a var variable within a function, that means it is scoped within the function or function scoped. In the case of this example, we can also access these global variables from within this function. So if I decided I want to console log, let's say, the total from within this function, the function call should print that total like normal because we have access to the global variables from inside of our function blocks. Okay, so we're going to continue looking at variables declared with the var keyword in JavaScript. And before we go into the next example, I just kind of want to reset what we've been doing. So if you guys have a look at my console, we have a couple of things that we printed to our console. So here we have my name being picked up from line 5. So we've logged that to the console, and it's taking from this variable assignment on line 2. And then we have on line 6 and 10 the value of 3. So if we go to line 6 here, we've logged to the console this total variable, and line 10 we've done the same thing. We've logged the total variable, but except it's being logged within our function on line 10. So the thing with variables declared with var in JavaScript is we can reassign and redeclare var variables in certain cases. This is where things do get a little tricky because you may experience some unexpected behavior depending on what you do and where it's scoped. But what we're going to do is I'll first go up to the top of our scope, top of our global scope, and what I'll do is I'll take my name and I'll reassign it. So if I decide I want to redeclare name, so when I say redeclare, we declared name up on line 2. I'm redeclaring it on line 4. If I'm simply reassigning it, I can remove the var keyword and just simply take the name of the variable and reassign a value to that. But I'm just gonna, just for the purpose of showing you guys, I'm going to declare and reassign, or in this case, redeclare and reinitialize. So I'll assign name a value of Jonathan as another name. And since we're already logging name to the console on line 6, I'm going to refresh, and we see my name, or not my name, but Jonathan's name appear in our console. So this is one thing that we don't see with the other types of variables in JavaScript with let and const. We can't reinitialize, or I guess redeclare them the same way they're done like this. And this is one thing about var that tends to give way to a little bit of weird behavior sometimes. For example, if I decided I wanted to take the total variable on line 3 and redeclare that, but instead of assigning it a value, I just decided I wanted to declare it like that. We're logging it to the console on line 8. I'm just going to refresh my browser, and we notice here that we don't see what at least I expected to see, which was total to be undefined, because we haven't assigned it a value, and because technically, since we redeclared it and didn't give it a value, we don't see that that's being shown up in our console here. However, if we go inside of our function, and the thing with scoping in JavaScript is another thing that is interesting that we may see is inside of this function, if we decide we want to declare a total variable, so for example, if I decide I want total to be 5, because we're logging total to the console, it's actually going to favor this total variable that's been initialized on line 12 because it's within its own scope. If there isn't a total here, then it will look to the global scope and it will look for a total variable and it will log that to the console. And that's why we see that here. So I'm going to keep that. And within the function scope, we can do similar things. We can reassign the total to a different value. So let's say if we decide it to be 7, we can refresh that. It will take it up as 7. We could do the same thing with our last name. If I wanted to reassign last name to something else, I could do that as well. We could just make up a different last name. And let's say if I wanted to take last name and log that to the console, I could do that too, and we'll see what last name is. So instead of Osei up on line 11, it takes what's on line 12 because it's reading from top to bottom. It will take that and log that to the console. Another thing, we're within our function scope, so let's say if we did the same thing we tried in our global scope, we could see what happens there as well. And it's the same type of behavior. We actually don't get undefined, we just get 7. But if I decided I wanted to remove these assigned values, I could do the same thing. And refresh, and now we get undefined because it seems that that is the only total variable that we can find within our function. So we'll pick that up and it will display undefined. So these are just a few of the quirks of var variables in JavaScript. It is important to understand these because this is typically where a beginner may start learning, and then from there you would eventually move on to learn about let and const variables, which I will also be discussing.